to a human uterus. Initially, it's very different, okay? And the main difference is because pigs give rise to litters, which is a number of babies, a number of piglets at any given time. You see a piglet fetus there, or an embryo.
Wow.
This particular specimen probably has 8, I never really counted, but between 8 and 10 piglets. So this makes the uterus a little different because you have to have room for a lot of babies instead of just one. So typically a human uterus, we typically call it, it's like an inverted pear, like an upside down pear shape. That's not what we see here for sure. But that aside, many of the structures are still the same. We're going to see an ovary, fallopian tubes, parametrium, endometrium. So you just have to kind of get over that initial shock or that initial difference between the human and the pig. So so the pig essentially has 2 uteruses. So we kind of know with the human, there's the uterus and then the 2 fallopian tubes. So just imagine that instead of splitting into 2 at the fallopian tube, it splits into 2 at the cervix. So you almost have 2 uteruses. Technically, it's one with 2. They're 2 uterine horns, and I'll show you exactly where that happens. Okay, so I've kind of got the 2 horns separated. They're very muscular, and it doesn't like me changing its shape. So anyway, it's right here. And what's looking at you right there, everybody, is the cervix. Is cervix on the list? Okay, so we need to put that on the list. So this muscular tube, not to be weird, but I'm going to put the probe where the sperm would go. The sperm would go up. That would be the os into the cervical canal. So then you see this is a single cervix, but then look what happens pretty quick, everybody. I'm going to have to spin it. See how it splits? Splits into 2. So it splits into 2 uterine horns. And I don't know if you can see that. Here's, again, this muscular nature. It doesn't really bend much, but we have this single cervix, and then as you twist it, you see it splits into 2. One's going this way, one's going that way. So you get these 2 uterine horns. Then the uterine horns are twisted and convoluted, and that's what you're seeing here. Most of this is uterus that you're seeing. What happens, and this is a pregnant uterus, by the way, as you know, we have this pouchy area where there would be a piglet inside, and then here's another one that's been cut open. And so they progress, and there's a muscular area without a piglet, and then you get another pouchy area, and I'm just kind of going up the uterine tube. So looking at the objectives, that's the cervix. The rest of this most of this are uterine horns. I don't think that's on the list, but this is the uterus itself. So when, do you remember what the outermost layer is of the uterus?
The epimetrium. And
not epi, but nice
perimetrium.
try. Perimetrium. So that's what this outermost layer is. So this would be the perimetrium layer. I could tease a pin, you know how you pierce a pin through a membrane, perimetrium. And then if we look on the inside, so this is one of those pouches, probably where the baby came out. The pouch, see the wrinkly kind of darker colored layer? What layer is that on the inside?
The endometrium.
The endometrium. And in the middle somewhere is the myometrium, but that's not on our list. And it is quite thin, so I'm not sure about that myometrium being in there. But the outside is the perimetrium. Then the inside layer, quite thin here, a little darker, is the endometrium. Not to be confused with the endometrium, we have this thing. Okay, it appears similar in texture and consistency and color, but notice it's not lining the wall, it's dangling out here. It's certainly not a layer of the uterus. Anybody know what this might be?
Either amnion or placenta?
Placenta.
Okay.
Placenta. I don't think amnion's on the list, but
Okay.
you're doing good without a blue sheet there. So this would be the placenta. And ultimately the umbilical cord of this buddy, you see that little opening, it's broken off, it's quite fragile. The umbilical cord would be connected to this placenta, and the baby, you know, being kind of wrapped up in it like that. Placenta.
That is so sad.
If we follow this uterine horn up, what's the next structure we should get to? Think about it. It's not too tricky of a question.
Fallopian tube?
Fallopian tube, that's right. So we're kind of following the same path of a human in the human uterus. So I'm just going to walk it, and it's a curvy little walk. We have the muscular area without a baby. Then we have a pouchy area where there is a baby. I'm just kind of walking away from the cervix, up the uterine horn, up the uterine horn. Here's another area. It's very spirally, which makes it confusing. I get it. Here we are. This is the last pouch. We're coming to the end. We're coming to the end. I'm going to show you the very end. It's right there. You see my hand here? This is the end of the uterus. Look, it's going to turn into a fallopian tube.
Oh, there it is.
See the tube? It's in that membrane. Then it gets a little zigzaggy. Look at how in my right hand I'm holding the uterus, and then you see this fallopian tube. And here's the ovary. That lumpy thing is the ovary, by the way. Does everybody see the fallopian tube? It's embedded in the membrane. See, I'm touching it with the probe. Look at, see, here's uterus, and then it narrows down to the fallopian tube. And the fallopian tube is that zigzaggy tube within this membrane. Hold on, I'm gonna spread it out for you. I'm gonna kind of use my finger there. See that zigzaggy tubule?
Yeah, that goes back and forth.
Goes back and forth. That's the fallopian tube. This membrane, look, this is how it normally goes. The membrane goes over this is the ovary, this lumpy thing is the ovary. I'm gonna put it in its natural configuration. It's like a hoodie. So that membrane is gonna go over the ovary. You can't even see the ovary anymore. That hoodie-like opening. So here's the fallopian tube, it's coming, like here's the ovary. The fallopian tube comes, and then as it approaches the ovary, it opens up like a big funnel, and that's the hoodie, and it goes around the ovary. All right, that big hoodie-like opening of a fallopian tube is the fimbriae. That's what this membrane is. And if you look real close, so when the egg pops out of the ovary, when it ovulates out of the ovary, it's kind of has nowhere to go. It's covered by the fimbriae, and at this point during the ovulatory period of a female cycle, there's a little suction. There's cilia and peristalsis that draw the egg up into the fallopian tube. The fimbriae's job is to keep the egg from like going into her abdominal cavity somewhere, because it doesn't go directly into the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube has to kind of draws the egg up. The sperm is in the if the sperm is anywhere, it's in the fallopian tube waiting for the egg, or it can get there pretty soon, like within a day. But anyway, this is the object of the fimbriae. Oftentimes the pictures show as like feathers or fingers. They kind of engorge during the female's reproductive phase when she ovulates, and they become big and activated. In a pig, they're not so fingery and feathery as they are like a membranous hood. So I'm going to pull the hoodie off now. This is the fimbriae, this hoodie membrane, and I'm just pulling it back to once again reveal and expose the ovary, this lumpy little nugget of an ovary. So then the egg would go from the ovary, it would get caught by the fimbriae. From the fimbriae, it gets kind of drawn into the fallopian tube proper, and it's in the see the zigzagging fallopian tube? It is in that where fertilization typically would occur. It doesn't happen in the ovary, it doesn't happen in the vagina, it happens in the fallopian tube. Then if fertilization did occur, the embryo would continue, again, that ciliary action and that suction, drawing now not just the egg, but the embryo up into the uterus proper. Where in the case of a pig, it will find one of these pouchy areas and implant. In the case of the human, there's not so many options. It's just one uterus, and the embryo comes in and it implants.
I have a question.
Yes.
So for the fimbriae, on the practical, it can be covered by the
Well,
ovary.
I would have it like this. This membrane here is the fimbriae. Then the ovary is, I would probably have them both visible, and I wouldn't
Okay.
cover the ovary up.
Okay.
And then the fallopian tube, that's what students have the most time. That's why do you see it? Do you see it? So say yes if you see it, because it's a little subtle. Do you see this zigzagging membrane in there? It's kind of it's the zigzagging tubule within the membrane. Okay, so that's the fallopian tube. You might best see it right here. I wish I had a third hand. So I've got the probe right on a little straight part where it's kind of visible. That's the fallopian tube. And notice right where my right hand is, that's where the fallopian tube connects to the uterus. Uterus is over here, and we begin our merry way. Fallopian tube is right here, and then it starts to zigzag. Okay, so, excuse me. We've got cervix, then the uterine horns with the perimetrium on the outside, the endometrium on the inside. In a pregnant uterus, which is what we have here, we would have these placentas. There's many placentas in each little pouch. Like here's an unopened one. There's a baby in there, I can feel it. And there's a placenta. So there's multiple placentas Like I said, I never counted them. Here's another cut open one with another placenta. I think there's at least 4 pouchy areas on each horn. So that'd probably be like 8 babies, so to speak. Okay, so the parametrium on the outside, endometrium on the inside, there's a lot. It's very convoluted. That's why it's a little confusing for me and you, probably. But you can kind of see it's twisting, it's spiraling. We go from these pouchy areas. This is all uterus, 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 uterus. And then here, the uterus comes to an end. That little tippy end where it connects to the fallopian tube. Connecting to the fallopian tube. The fallopian tube kind of zigs and zags, and then it has a big wide mouth that almost resembles a hoodie called the fimbriae, which would really usually be around the ovary and accept and draw in the ovulated egg. Otherwise, the egg just goes off into her abdominal cavity. It kind of pops out, doesn't know where to go. It's up to the fallopian tube and the fimbriae to draw the egg in to where the sperm might be. And the sperm are in the fallopian tube. They last in a female's body maybe 4 days, but the egg after it ovulates is only viable for about 1 day. So the sperm have to be there. Maybe a couple could have intercourse a couple days before ovulation, maybe 3 days. The sperm will still be hanging out. They'll probably be dying off. But as long as some are there, they can fertilize the egg. Or the egg ovulates and the couple has to have intercourse within about a day. And then the sperms, get there before the egg kind of degrades within about a 24 to 36 hour period. So even though humans can, in theory, have sex or reproduce, so to speak, all year, we don't have a breeding season per se, really it's about 1 day out of each month, which is about 14, 12 or 14 days altogether, a day and a half or so. So it's like the human breeding 2 weeks has just been spread out throughout the whole year with, a day and a half in January, a day and a half in February or something like that. Adds up to about 2 to 3 weeks of where the female's really receptive. The egg can be fertilized during that much time out of the year. Any questions, or you want to see something again? It's a little convoluted. It might benefit you to, look at this on your own before you leave today. Practical's next week. I understand it's a little confusing, but you should probably be familiar with these parts and pieces by now. Any questions, or you'd like to